Okay.
Hello, confidant community. Do you know this one? Listen up. Welcome to the live confidant community. I'm just getting my stride right now into this jam. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. So you might know that each time I play a song for the live, there's always a method to the madness. So I'm going to talk about why I chose the song in a second. But for those of you who are new to the confidant community, welcome to the live. We're all about making financial conversations accessible, and today will not be any different. I actually love music, which is one of the reasons you hear me play music all of the time on this show. And so this, to me, music always just sets a vibe for our topic, because sometimes making financial conversations or even talking about finance can be challenging. So why not set the mood? Why not create some excitement around it? So that's why I chose this band for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Does anybody know this song? If you do, feel free to post in the chat as always. The reason I actually chose this song is you gotta like listen in on the lyrics, because the lyrics are fire on this song. So the lyrics of this song is actually, I'm going to actually read you the words. But if you don't know who the band is actually Jungle. And the song actually that we've been playing is Dominoes. And this band Jungle has so many bangers. It's like crazy. So if you've never heard of Jungle before, check them out. Again, you got to listen really closely to the lyrics to understand why I chose this track. And so I'm going to just read you some of the lyrics, because the refrain goes like this: every day is wonderful when you're near, and have mercy on me. I actually feel Stuart's back for the live confidant community, but I feel like this is how people feel when their partner moves into their property. They want them near, but they hope mercy on them if things don't work out, right, Stuart? Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And actually, that's one of the reasons I brought Stuart back. Now, if you don't remember Stuart, you need to go back to the original live that we did where we talked about high-earning women and estate planning issues. But today he's back for something else. He's back for real estate. And so he's going to talk to us about the essential information high-earning women need to know when they move in someone and they own a property. So how do they deal with this? They move somebody into their property. How do they deal with this? Stuart, we got a lot to talk about. Welcome back again to the live. Let's begin.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me back. And Jack and I talked about real estate, and then I thought this would be a good topic just to dive into for all the listeners. And let me start off a little slowly, and then we'll rev it up. And
yeah, 100%. And Stuart, before I
get into more depth. So
go ahead.
Let's talk about types of ownership.
Yeah, let's definitely talk about that. I was going to say, but remind me to give you the answers to the survey question about whether or not people get consulting about this. So
yes,
remind me about that.
I will remind you.
Okay.
So sole ownership is easy. I own my house. I don't. My wife owns it.
Of course she does.
Actually, I think I mentioned last seminar that we switched it over to our holding company because of a medical issue, but you can have joint ownership,
right.
Common law partner. You can even have joint ownership, elderly parent and an adult child. That complicates things a little. Now, joint means right of survivorship on death.
Right.
No,
so if I die, you might own a property, it's going to go to you.
Correct. It's like an automatic transfer with some paperwork.
Okay.
Next is tenants in common. So that means there's a separate undivided interest which goes according to the will of the partner. So off this way and off this way, half in theory, or it could be a different percentage. Then a corporation can own a property as its own or as a trustee for the individuals. And lastly, a living trust can own a property. Now, the last two are not common and they have some tax implications. So we just don't jump into these because it's expedient.
Advice, always advice when you do these kinds of things.
Always advice from your advisors. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know what, Confidant Community, did you know you could own a property in a trust or in a corporation? So maybe some of you are already doing that, but I'd love to know. Feel free to post in the chat about that.
And your corporation can be a trustee for the individuals.
Ooh, say that again.
There are reasons to do this. And one reason is to avoid probate if there's no other probatable assets, but I want to leave that for an estate administration discussion, which might be another 5 at 5.
I know, Confidant Community, Stuart keeps finding out ways to come back. This is what I realized.
I do. Okay, so let's go to a situation. Now we're going to start with some complications. So let's go to a situation where common law partners living together, and one wants to make a direct contribution to the equity in the house. So
that always happens.
She buys in, pays for an interest, actually writes a check. There's land transfer tax on that. And then it's clear that that person will own an interest in the house.
Right.
So direct contribution or pay off a mortgage, for instance, and then there's an agreement that gives the person an equity right. Now that's easy. So direct contribution. Now let's get into these difficult topics. So the next one is, what about an indirect contribution and a possible equity claim later? So an example is paying property taxes, house insurance, utilities, water.
Yeah, and I remember this, Stuart, because you were talking about this the last time. So, people, we talk about this song, "Have Mercy on Me. I want you nearby, so I move you in. Hopefully you'll treat me well if things don't work out." But as you know, that's not always the case. So I'm like, you know what? You can pay the property taxes, but wait, is what you're saying, Stuart?
Well, I'm saying it may give rise to a claim for an ownership interest in the house, believe it or not. And the second way indirect contribution may give rise to a claim is sanding the floors, painting a room, renovating, or paying for a renovation. That may give rise to a claim. It's another indirect contribution to the equity of the house.
Can I ask about another indirect? I believe when you and I spoke before, and this was kind of jarring because these are conversations I'll have to have with clients who have children. So if I have kids from a previous marriage and you're taking care of them for me while I go out to work, that could give you a claim to my property.
Okay. Well, let me just backtrack a bit.
Okay.
You can't stop someone from making a claim. There's nothing to prohibit someone from making a claim. Whether it has merit or not is arguable on the facts of each case.
Right.
So in the case of child rearing, where it frees up the other individual to go to work and earn money to pay down the mortgage, that may give rise to an argument. And that alone may not be enough, but at the same time, paying some bills. And then, that goes into, what about buying food, groceries, cleaning services, a landscaper, the gardener, the snow removal.
Right.
Again, here's contribution. But just a quick aside here that my own housekeeper was living with someone, a partner, and he asked her to e-transfer $1,000 a month to offset some of the costs. So my reaction to that is that she probably has a claim against the equity in the house, although it's in his name only.
Yeah, and that e-transfer isn't so innocent. Just, hey, here's help me out with $1,000. That's maybe the bills for all the house, including the mortgage, is $5,000. But I'm asking for $1,000. But you're saying that could potentially give rise to a claim.
Potentially, and so a partner moves in. Don't ask for rent. That's not a landlord and tenant situation. And Don't ask for an e-transfer every month to offset costs. That may give rise to a claim. So, you're thinking, well, what am I going to do here?
Exactly what I was going to say. I might just have them decide not to have them so near after all, is what I'm thinking after all.
Well, there is a thing called a domestic contract.
Right, exactly.
Now, I don't love them, but they're good or applicable in certain circumstances. But one of the problems with a domestic contract is that each party has to give full financial disclosure in writing that's attached to the contract.
Right.
So the question is, partner moves in, wants to contribute. We're not sure how to go about doing this. You need advice on how to do it. And then someone will say, well, just do a domestic contract. But now you're in a situation. Do you want to disclose every single asset you have? Do you want to disclose what's in your investment account? Do you want to disclose the rental condominium that you own? Do you want to disclose your life insurance, your pension?
Not so much. I want them to love me for me.
Well, exactly. And, I'm not sure you want to go there with full disclosure. So what do you do in this situation? Well, seek professional advice. And it should be from a family law lawyer. It shouldn't be from your real estate lawyer.
Why is that?
Well, we all have our specialty areas.
Right.
Some of us, my estate planning and my estate administration work generates a lot of real estate. I've always done real estate, so I can do the conveyancing work. But per se, I'm not a real estate lawyer. But if someone comes to me with a family law question, I have to refer it out. I can't deal with it. So be careful. You may have a real estate lawyer and you're going to pose some questions here about how should I own my property? What if my partner wants to buy in? How do I structure this? Well, the real estate lawyer can implement it, but a family law lawyer needs to weigh in on this and give an opinion. And maybe the accountant needs to jump in and also give an opinion because it may have some tax implications.
Right.
So, just beware of who's answering your question and make sure that person has the expertise to deal with your particular situation.
Well, as you said that, I just think how complete and accurate is the answer if you're getting it from one person who might have that one specialty, as you said, on the real estate side, but doesn't understand the family law implications or the tax implications. And that's kind of why it's so important to build that team of people, of professionals.
Absolutely. And, I always say, like, who do you call if? Like, you have your financial advisor, Jackie.
Right.
You have your lawyer, me. You have your accountant, John Smith or Joan Smith. And these people may have to refer you to someone else.
Right.
Like I'm referring clients, and I know there's accountants I work with who sometimes have to refer their own client to a tax specialist.
That's right.
And answer the question.
Yeah. How specific is the issue? And, is it complete if you're, as we talked about, if you're not getting the full picture from other professionals? And is that professional specific enough for what you need to get an answer to? So it's really crucial to kind of go, so do you have family law experience? If you're giving me family law advice and we're talking about real estate, do you have tax information? Should I have you talk to my accountant as well?
Yeah, most lawyers won't touch a family law question.
That's good. That's
it's complicated, and your estate planning lawyer is not doing family law. Your estate administration lawyer is not doing family law. But that lawyer needs to recognize the issue and say, we need to bring in someone for an opinion.
Right. So that being the case, if I'm looking at a domestic contract and I don't want to go, here's all my assets in case you want to claim later, this full disclosure, what are my other options?
Well,
how do I protect myself? Actually, even before that, what about if I get married before I
that good segue, because next on my list, what happens with a marriage now? So
I don't do a domestic contract.
Right.
I'm going to ask about how we can protect ourselves from both of those scenarios. So what happens to some of the things we're talking about if I get married? If I just go, you know what? I'm so happy with this person. Not only do I want them near, I want them near forever. So let's get married.
All right. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this because it's really a family law
Right.
question. But in theory, each person does a fair market valuation of all of his assets on the date of marriage. So that's your base.
Right.
And then you go into the marriage, and it's very different from a common law relationship because the residence, the matrimonial home, takes on a special character between the spouses.
Right.
So, it's kind of, we're heading to a 50-50 split at that point. And I think a term of the marriage would be, well, you better buy or contribute a large amount, pay off the mortgage as a term of all this. And you don't have to have a contract for that. It can just be worked out that, yeah, let's get married. But, in fairness, I think you should pay off my mortgage
Right.
before we do that.
Right.
Because then, a cottage kind of fits into this as well. Is it used in the marriage? And maybe that partner will have a claim against the equity in the cottage.
Yeah, I'm dealing with a client that's going through that right now, actually.
Yeah, better to talk about a direct contribution, which is buy-in. Then we won't have arguments later.
Assuming that they're in the same financial position as you are, which
typically they're not, but sometimes they are.
Right.
Try to work it out. And there may be a condominium there that the partner owns that hasn't sold it yet. It's rented out. There's some equity there. And there could be a promise of cashing that out at some point and paying off the house mortgage. I mean, there's ways to deal with this. It's very fact specific, and it's hard to generalize about what you should do to protect yourself. But I think the short answer is that next on my list is, what are the legal ways to protect yourself?
And legal ways. Everybody's like, okay, what do we?
Yeah, well, the short answer is get good advice. Get advice, and you may not like the opinion, but you're getting the advice, and then it's up to you whether you want to implement it, and if maybe get a second opinion. I mean, it's worth spending an hour or two with a competent lawyer to get an opinion, and don't mumble grumble about the fees, because it may save thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars later.
Yeah, you say that, and it brings me to the survey, which is the survey we had on LinkedIn. So Confidant Community, I'm not sure if you saw it yet. If you haven't, please feel free to answer the survey question, which is basically to find out if you're contemplating moving a partner in and you own real estate, do you get advice? Are you likely to get advice? Very likely to get advice, unsure, or not likely to get advice? So that was really the question. And the majority of people so far, we only started posting this on Monday, said that they would get advice. But what people say they'll do,
yes,
and what they actually do, it doesn't always, pan out in the wash. And I say this because, as an advisor who's been doing this for 25 years and have talked to so many women who, didn't expect that the relationship wasn't not going to work out, are either separating from a contract, like a common cohabitation scenario, like a common law relationship. So they're separating from that, or they're separating from a marriage, and seeing the costs, the financial costs of not addressing this issue. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, let's say the fee, let's go on the high side, is a couple $1,000s. If that's what it's going to cost you, is that a cost or an investment in protecting your biggest asset, which is your home, which is worth, a few $100,000. And if you're in Toronto, that might be close to $1 million, which is the average cost of real estate in Toronto. So what's $2,000 relative to your much larger cost of your biggest asset? I'd love to say your biggest asset is what you have with me or with your advisor. Typically it's your real estate. So what is it worth to protect that? What is it worth to you to protect that investment is really the question.
All right, so let me add 2 points from that.
Absolutely.
That's excellent. When you go to the dentist, you have to go 2 or 3 times a year. It's expensive, but you have to go to the dentist. You don't have to go to the lawyer. and lawyers are expensive, and people just don't want to pay legal fees if they can avoid it. Well, you can avoid it by not going. And reading on the internet to get legal advice is very, very dangerous. And I don't post on the internet. I've been asked, I've done a lot of seminars for Manulife pre-COVID, what we're doing with Jackie. I don't write articles. I don't blog because it may be stale dated in 6 months. So now it's still out there, and people should not follow. You got to be careful what's out there. And there are changes to income tax rules. There are changes to many things. There was a recent change about whether marriage revokes a will. I mean, you'll see articles written about that, and they're out of date. They should have been taken down. You got to be very careful with what you read. And, it's like reading for medical issues. Like you have
same idea.
Problem with your knee. So now you're reading about what issues there could be with the knee, but you have to go to a doctor for advice. And similarly, don't try to do self-help with legal matters. It's not a good idea, or financial matters for that.
Yeah, you know what it is? It conflates emotional. Your logic side of the brain knows you should protect your asset. Your emotional side of the brain says you may not want to bring it up because it's a challenging conversation to have with someone that you feel really good about. And you're like, well, we're talking about the end of a relationship and what could happen. But I know it sounds terrible, but it's at the same time, it just means you're kind of getting a gauge of how that person will react in a challenging scenario, which chances are you're going to have many challenging scenarios ahead in that relationship. So this is a good opportunity to kind of just make sure you have that conversation, that really important conversation around money and assets, because chances are over the course of that relationship, you're going to have many conversations about money and assets.
No, absolutely.
So why not start with the most important one, where you're both protecting your assets, your respective assets that you're bringing into the relationship?
So that's a good segue into my next topic, which is implications on separation. What happens?
Exactly. So let's
make my second point from a little earlier. I mentioned full financial disclosure for a domestic contract, cohabitation agreement. If you don't disclose, then it can be set aside because both parties are not informed before they enter into this agreement.
Yeah.
And someone may be thinking, well, why can't I just do a contract about the house that we're living in? Well, no, because you either do a full domestic contract with full disclosure or you don't. You can't just isolate one asset and do a contract. Now, I'm going to qualify that by saying if your partner pays off the mortgage and says, well, that should give me a 40% interest in the equity, then we can do a little agreement to say that. And both parties can agree that Joan Smith is paying off the mortgage and therefore is acquiring a 40% interest. Because you can have a paper trail of money and you can have a registration of a mortgage discharge. So we have all the backup documents there. So the intention of the parties is clear. So that we can do a mini agreement. But otherwise, it's a full-blown agreement. So let's jump into separation.
Yeah, and as you say that, Stuart, I'm just thinking about how, going back to having these conversations, prior to moving in, like the domestic contract, or how talking to a lawyer, working through an agreement with a lawyer to protect that asset. It's also great because you have a third party involved who doesn't have anybody's interest specifically in mind, because who knows, the person who's coming to the relationship might have assets they also want to protect. Right?
Oh, absolutely. But add a fourth party, because each individual needs independent legal advice.
That's exactly right. So everybody's interests are being looked after. Yeah. And then you're going to have the most important, money conversation you'll have, which is the money conversation before the relationship really gets going. And then that way it typically makes it easier to have these conversations as time goes on, because you already know how things look and how those conversations can go.
Okay. So just before I jump into separation, I just want to make one little explanation that common law partners do not acquire property rights unless there's direct contribution,
Right.
indirect contribution.
Right.
Spouses, on the other hand, have property. Now, there's a huge difference with that.
Right.
So now what happens on separation? So it's very different if the parties are married than if they're not. So the departing partner cannot make a property claim per se unless there's contribution and has to prove it in court. Now, however, that person can claim support. Like a spouse, a married spouse. So there is a right to claim support. But dividing up property, that's an uphill battle. I would have to have some basis for that claim. Now, flipping over to married couples, there's a property right. There's I'd say a higher right or an easier right to claim support. And it's not necessarily female claiming from male. It can be the reverse. There are plenty of
100%.
Male claiming from female. There might be a difference in income. There might be a difference in spending on the joint assets. So all this is a matter of facts, and each case would turn on its own facts. So I just have to say that separation is trouble and it's expensive. Each party will run up astronomical legal fees, and often it's arguing about a dinnerware set or a silver tea service. And
you've seen these movies, haven't you, Stuart?
Well, yeah, and let's ignore children for a minute and joint custody and all that stuff.
Right, right.
So when I practiced family law, when I was fresh out of law school, and I was still doing it, I'd have a meeting and I'd say, do you see the garbage can behind me? Just throw your money in there. Don't give it to me first. That's where it's going.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the lawyers only who win in these proceedings. So how can you avoid all these nasty things that will happen on a separation? Well, we revert back. Do you have a cohabitation agreement? Do you have a domestic contract?
Right, or prenup or postnup?
And have you hidden money from a spouse? I have a lot of things that come my way where the one spouse won't have any idea about the assets of the other.
Right.
It's all in separate accounts, separate investment accounts, could be offshore.
Right.
So the best way out of this is to, and it'll probably keep you in the relationship, is from day one, disclose, discuss, open up joint bank accounts. Each party contributes for expenses, and you kind of go into this and not worry too much about the legal side. Like, this is funny coming from a lawyer, but you're entering into a partnership, living together or getting married. It's a partnership in life, and
it's a business too, right?
It's like you treat it like a business.
Yeah, it really is. Like between, because you're looking at everything. You're the more fun aspects is the love part. Like,
yes, of course,
somebody that you want to hold near and keep near and all of those things. And it's fun. But then there's all of the business aspects, like taking care of children and managing the expenses of the household.
Yes,
and,
of course.
Definitely looking at ways to, pay for things in the future, like paying, like your retirement account, how you'll pay for these things. These are all real things that we have to deal with. And I find the challenge for most people is they aren't equipped with the language to have these kinds of conversations. And they are scared to have those conversations, which is why I've often found, and I'm sure you do, Stuart, that people bring me in to breach these uncomfortable conversations with their partner to help facilitate something like, let's talk about a cohab agreement, and what my advisor wants to talk to. We want to have a conversation about protecting each other's assets and putting you in touch with a lawyer. Everybody gets one, that kind of thing. But getting that conversation started, because it is still such a vulnerability for people, especially for women, to actually say, I want to protect my assets that I've worked really hard for. Typically, what we find, Stuart, is women are taking more time to get educated. So by the time they've gotten to the workforce, they've, invested a lot of money in their career, and then they are going to, invariably, quite a few of them will take time off to have kids, and then they live longer. So there's a lot at stake, which is why it's really important to protect your asset and make that investment into protecting your asset, your real estate, by talking to a lawyer.
Right. And when I'm approached by a common law couple, I have a number of same-sex marriages, clients, and my first question is, who is my client? Like, I can have both as clients, because in a common law relationship, there may be some competing interests, and I'm not sure I can advise each fully.
Right.
So I typically end up with one of the two as my client, and it's a rare situation where I'm able to act for both. But typically, if they're married, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then there are some red flags from my end to be careful that I'm not in conflict.
Absolutely.
So, there are some challenges with that. I'm not saying to people you shouldn't live common law. I have one client, they never were married. They have teenage kids, and everything's great. But that's not so common. That they have to do their estate planning. They have to do everything that married couples do.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about next, is estate planning. So what are some of the implications of owning property when it comes to estate planning, whether you're common law or if you're in a marriage?
That's a good question. It's next on my list. This is funny with these segues.
Good. I feel like you're simpatico today, Stuart.
Exactly. So, these are discussion points. So, basically, there are ways to deal with real property, with the house, cottage, in a will, which is fair. So one example is, if one party owns the house, then that party can grant a life interest to the other party. And it basically says you can stay in this house for 3 years, 5 years. Sometimes it's for the rest of your life, which I kind of recommend against, because that can go out too long. But let's say there's a 3-5 year window to give that person a chance to resettle. And then there might be a lump sum payment to go to that person out of a house sale, where the rest is left to the children of the first marriage relationship. Right. So there are ways to deal with that, or some people may just leave the house or condominium to the partner, saying, we've been together for 15 years and I'm just going to leave this to you. But if there are children from a first marriage, it's typical to grant a life interest where the surviving partner pays all the expenses. I mean, I always ask the question, do you want the estate to pay the expenses, or do you want the person living there to pay the expenses? And typically we do it, the person living there pays all expenses. So on that person's death, or at the end of the 5 years, whatever the will says, then the property's sold and money goes to the children of the first marriage. So that's a fair way to do that. But again, it's up to the individual. So it's a discussion point. What would you like to do with your cottage? What would you like to do with your house? What would you like to do with your investment condo? All of these things have value, but it's easy if there are children, because typically each party leaves his or her share to the children of the first relationship. Now, I have one where, of course, there's a child from the two of them. So they each had children from before, started living together, had a child. So now how do we deal with that? So it's another discussion point, and we have to work out a formula that is fair to all.
Yeah, that's challenging.
Challenging, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it sounds to me like so much to think about, and I really find having a professional to kind of talk some of these things through is really important. It's kind of hard to be the person who's trying to make the decision and also the person who can walk through all the options. So it's hard to, I always say, as an advisor, I have my own advisor who I talk through my issues with, because I can't have two minds where I'm advising and giving advice to myself, right? So it's easier to have someone kind of, help you go through those mental exercises where you're thinking through, what do I want to do with my properties if something happens to me? I have children, maybe they're older, or I don't have children and I have a partner. What do I actually want to have happen to my property? And thinking through different scenarios, that's how a professional can help, is like run you through a bunch of different scenarios and what that would look like, so you can kind of determine which one makes sense for you. If you don't have any experience in that area, you might be stuck in your head and have only one scenario in your mind, and that scenario might not be the optimal one, is what is an important thing to consider. Now, another piece that I think is concerning, especially as a woman who might not have children, is what if I get sick and I have a home and I have a partner?
Well, that's a whole other discussion about.
I feel like you're gonna have to come back again, Stuart.
Yeah, it's who. Well, let me backtrack a bit, and then I'm going to deal with that. Mm-hmm. So, typically at the end of my live presentations before COVID, mm-hmm. I would have a screen up that says, if you have an issue, who do you call? So you need, and then before all this electronic stuff, it was a Rolodex where you look up dentist, doctor, accountant, lawyer, financial advisor, no particular order here, but who do you call? So now I'll get an email from someone and out of the blue, I haven't spoken to you in 10 years. Can I run a question by you? So, you have relationships with right. your advisors. And then when you have an issue, you can pick up the phone or you can send an email, and you reach out to Jack, you reach out to me, whatever, or your accountant, and you get a short answer rather than making a decision, getting into a problem, and then reaching out where this person has to undo some problem you've created by not having full advice at the
right.
time. So I'm not sure I answered your question. So let's circle back to that.
Right.
What was that question?
The question was really about disability, and I feel like that's yes. a whole other live, to be quite honest. I guess the question really is, how does one protect themselves in a scenario? What are maybe a couple of things, a couple of points to consider? Like I said, I think you're gonna have to come back for a full live on that one. But what are a couple of points to consider?
Yeah, let me try to give a short answer to that. If there's no power of attorney for property, then you have to make a court application. Someone does on behalf of the individual for appointment of someone, court appointment as guardian of property. It's a slow process, it's expensive, and that person has to make up a management plan and probably doesn't have enough information or know your finances. So everyone needs a continuing power of attorney for property. Now, who do you name? Do you name your common law partner?
Ooh, there you go.
So now, who can you entrust with managing your finances? So I've had situations where I'm at the hockey arena with parents I know, and we're talking about vacations, and a couple says to me, we're going a couple of weeks down south. And I knew the husband was out of work. He'd been laid off for a couple of months. He's looking for work. I said, how can you afford to do that? And the reply was, well, our mother's in a nursing home and she's not capable anymore. And she used to give us gifts. So we decided that if she was capable, she would probably give us a gift to pay for the trip. So we're using her money.
Wow.
And that's a new one. I had the same reaction. I was in shock. Like, they were basically stealing their incapable mother's money. So
that's actually a huge issue in the financial industry right now.
Yeah.
It's vulnerable seniors for that reason.
So, elder abuse, this is rampant. It's as rampant as fraud. Like, adult children think they can just dip into their parents' money when they become incapable because they say, there's enough money to pay for the nursing home and caregivers. And yes, it's true. There may be, but I was once fired by 3 adult daughters once their mother became incapable because I wouldn't cooperate with them and basically stealing their money. And I told them that.
So are you saying, Stuart, in an indirect way, if you're a couple in a common law relationship. I might not necessarily just want to put my partner. Is this a conflict potentially?
It's actually prudent. It's not a conflict, because
Okay.
if you're not disclosing all of your finances and you don't want that person to manage your money,
And care, right?
and care, yeah, power of attorney for personal care as well. Yeah, you have to find someone a little more independent. Like usually an adult child would be enter in at that point, step in, but I've got a lot of people who come to me and say, I don't have anyone. I have no family in Ontario. I have, distant cousins in the UK. You may have to hire a trust company.
Yeah, there's a lot more professional companies, and it's not just the bank anymore, Confidant Community. So there are other organizations that you can call on, who often I find when I've looked at the fees might charge something a little bit more reasonable for being in that situation. So, consider a professional trustee if those are some of the concerns that you have, and do your homework, look around and check out the reviews, see what they're offering. But yeah, there are options, and it's something that nobody ever wants to think about being sick. But at the same time, again, do you want to be in that situation and not have fully looked at your options and made sure you created the best scenario for yourself and for your children?
Yeah. Step one is getting the paperwork in order.
Yeah.
Like if you're appointing someone, make sure you've got your paperwork in order. So,
honestly, Stuart, I feel like our conversation just started and we're already over time. And so we're going to have to bring Confidant Community. We're going to have to bring Stuart back.
Two more things. And then
two more things. See, this is the lawyer in Stuart, right?
One thing, we talked about separation, but we didn't talk about death.
Yes.
We didn't talk about death. So that's a whole other discussion. So I may have to come back to talk about.
You're going to have to come back.
I think so.
Yeah.
But, I'm a lawyer. I have to give you my disclaimer.
Yes, this is it.
Well, I'm sorry, but this is for educational purposes only. We're having a nice discussion, but please do not follow anything. Go ahead with anything I've said. I'm not offering advice.
No.
It's having an educational discussion.
I love how you put it, Stuart. So, just so that you understand the fine print that's there. So do not take this Confidant Community as legal advice. This is really to get you thinking about whether or not you've really put in place a plan that, is around the intentions that you want for your family. So, that was the whole idea of this whole High Earning Women podcast, is to get women looking at ways to protect their finances, learn more about their finances. Stuart, as always, thank you for bringing your expert insights into this conversation. Confidant Community, do not wait. Just like that dental analogy you gave, do not wait until the pain is real before you start implementing some of these ideas. It often is too late. But if you were someone who's just joined us and you didn't get all of Stuart's expert insights, don't worry, we've got you. I'll be linking Stuart's contact to our live summary, and you can check out the live summary as well this Sunday. And also, if you are someone who is concerned about your current financial plans, you don't have a financial plan and you're concerned, we've got Jody on the live as well, who's going to be providing our ways to get in contact with us if you want more information on how you can start to have these really important conversations about your finances. So don't worry. We've got that. We're going to post in the chat as well. So direct message us if you do have questions. And then Confidant Community, if you enjoyed this live, sharing is caring. It's always caring when you share this live with someone who might really need to hear this. Also, feel free to like and comment. We love your feedback, and it's always so awesome when we hear from you. Thank you again, Stuart, for being here. Thanks again, folks, for tuning into the live. See you next week, live community. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.
Bye now.
Bye now.